My heart stopped when I woke to the weight of him against me, his breath warm on my neck. Our bodies tangled in the dark. I didn't dare move, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what I felt. This was Ryan, my son's best friend, barely 21, sleeping soundly in my bed, and I, a 38-year-old widower, was unraveling. It started innocently enough. A late-night call from my son, Ethan, who was away at college in Boston. "Dad, Ryan's got nowhere to go tonight. His landlord's a jerk. Kicked him out for missing rent. Can he crash at our place?" I could hear the worry in Ethan's voice, the kind that comes from knowing your friend's in trouble. I said yes without thinking. Our home in suburban Philadelphia had always been a safe haven for Ethan and his friends, a place where they could escape the chaos of their lives. Ryan was no stranger, had been coming over since he and Ethan were in high school, their laughter filling the house, their late-night video game marathons a constant hum. But this time, it was different. This time, it was just me and Ryan. I hadn't seen him in months, not since Ethan left for his sophomore year. When Ryan showed up at my door, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder, I barely recognized him. The lanky kid with braces was gone. In his place stood a young man with sharp cheekbones, dark hair falling into his eyes, and a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. "Thanks, Mr. Callahan," he said, his voice low, almost shy. "I won't be any trouble." I waved it off, told him to call me David, and pointed him to the guest room. But the way his eyes lingered on me, just a second too long, sent a jolt through me I couldn't explain. The house felt too quiet that night. Ethan's absence was a wound that hadn't healed since my wife, Sarah, passed 3 years ago. The cancer took her fast, leaving me and Ethan to navigate a world that felt hollow without her. I'd thrown myself into work, into being a good dad, into keeping the pieces of our life together. But alone in that big house, the silence was deafening. Ryan's presence was a disruption, a spark in the stillness. We ended up in the living room after dinner, sharing a pizza and a couple of beers. I asked about his life, trying to keep things light. He told me about his job at a coffee shop, his art classes at the community college, how he was trying to figure out who he was. "It's hard," he said, staring at the bottle in his hand. "People look at you like you're supposed to have it all together by now, but I don't even know what I want." His honesty caught me off guard. I remembered being 21, the weight of the world pressing down, the fear of not being enough. I told him that, shared a story about how I dropped out of college for a semester because I thought I'd never measure up. He laughed, a soft sound that made the room feel warmer. The conversation turned personal, almost too easily. He asked about Sarah, about what it was like to lose her. I hadn't talked about her in so long. Not like that. The words spilled out how I still kept her favorite scarf on the armchair, how I sometimes caught myself waiting for her to walk through the door. Ryan listened, really listened, his eyes locked on mine. "You loved her so much," he said quietly. "That must be beautiful, even if it hurts." I nodded, my throat tight, and for a moment, it felt like he saw Minute just Ethan's dad, but me. It was late when we decided to call it a night. The guest room was ready, but Ryan hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. "David," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can I ask you something?" I nodded, unsure where this was going. "Do you ever feel alone? Like, really alone?" The question hit like a punch. I wanted to lie, to say I was fine, but his eyes held mine, and I couldn't. "Every day," I admitted. He didn't say anything, just nodded, like he understood. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked, the wind rattled the windows, and my mind wouldn't stop replaying Ryan's question. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps. Ryan stood in my doorway, his silhouette faint in the moonlight. "I can't sleep," he said. "Can I stay here? Just for a bit?" My heart raced, but I nodded, scooting over to make room. He climbed into bed, keeping his distance at first. We talked in hushed tones, about nothing and everything: movies, music, the way the stars looked brighter in the suburbs. Somewhere in the quiet, we drifted off. And then I woke up, his body pressed against mine, his arm draped over my chest. My pulse pounded in my ears. This was wrong, wasn't it? He was Ethan's friend, half my age, a guest in my home. But the warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing, stirred something I hadn't felt in years. Not since Sarah. Maybe not even then. I lay there, frozen, torn between pulling away and staying exactly where I was. The morning light crept through the curtains, and Ryan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He didn't pull away. Instead, he looked at me, sleepy and unguarded, and smiled. "Morning," he whispered, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My mouth went dry. What was happening to me? To us? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing: this moment, this feeling, was a line I couldn't uncross. And part of me didn't want to. I slid out of bed before Ryan could say anything else, muttering something about coffee and stumbling to the kitchen. My hands shook as I filled the pot, the memory of his body against mine burning in my mind. I was David Callahan, a father, a widower, a man who'd built a life on stability, yet here I was, rattled by a moment I couldn't explain. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his hair mussed, wearing one of Ethan's old t-shirts that fit him too well. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the counter. His voice was soft, but there was a weight to it, like he knew something had shifted. I nodded, avoiding his eyes, and handed him a mug. "Just need caffeine," I said, forcing a laugh. He took the mug, his fingers brushing mine, and my stomach twisted. It was nothing, I told myself. A fleeting touch. But it didn't feel like nothing. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy. I wanted to ask what last night meant, why he'd climbed into my bed, why he hadn't pulled away when he woke up. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked about his plans, trying to steer us back to neutral ground. He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "I don't know. I've got a week to find a new place before my landlord changes the locks. After that, maybe I'll crash with friends or something." His voice was casual, but his eyes betrayed him there was fear there. Uncertainty. "You can stay here," I blurted out before I could stop myself. His eyebrows shot up, and I backpedaled. "I mean, until you figure things out. Ethan would want me to help." It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The idea of Ryan leaving, of this strange, electric tension disappearing, made my chest ache in a way I wasn't ready to name. He smiled, a small, grateful thing that made him look younger. "Thanks, David. That means a lot." We didn't talk about the night before, but it hung between us, an unspoken question neither of us dared to answer. The next few days were a blur of normalcy and unease. Ryan settled into the guest room, his stuff scattered across the floor like he'd always belonged there. We fell into a rhythm: mornings over coffee, evenings watching old movies, him sketching in a notebook while I graded papers for my teaching job at the community college. He was easy to be around, too easy. His laugh, his quiet observations, the way he'd nudge my shoulder when he teased might all felt dangerously familiar, like a life I'd forgotten how to live. But there were moments that stopped me cold. Like when I caught him staring at me over dinner, his fork paused midair, his eyes soft and searching. Or when he helped me fix a leaky faucet. our hands brushing as we passed tools, the air thick with something unspoken. I told myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into it. He was young, vulnerable, just looking for a friend. But deep down, I knew better. There was something in the way he looked at me, something that mirrored the chaos in my own heart. One night, after too many glasses of wine, the truth slipped out. We were on the couch, some forgotten movie playing in the background, when Ryan turned to me. "David," he said, his voice low, "why don't you date? You're amazing. You deserve someone." The question caught me off guard, and the wine loosened my tongue. "I don't know," I said, staring at the glass in my hand. After Sarah, I didn't think I could feel that way again. And now, I stopped, my heart pounding. His eyes locked on mine, and I felt exposed, like he could see every doubt, every fear. "And now?" he prompted, leaning closer. I swallowed hard. The words stuck in my throat. "Now, I'm not sure what I feel," I admitted. It was the closest I'd come to naming it, this pull, this need, this terrifying want. Ryan didn't look away. Instead, he reached out, his hand resting on mine, warm and steady. "Maybe that's okay," he said softly. "Maybe you're allowed to figure it out." I pulled my hand away, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. "Ryan, you're Ethan's friend," I said, my voice rough. It's complicated." He nodded, but the hurt in his eyes cut deeper than I expected. "I know," he said, "but I'm not a kid, David. I know what I feel." And there it was, out in the open, raw and undeniable. I stood, needing distance, needing air. "I need to think," I said, heading for the stairs. But as I lay in bed that night, alone, I couldn't stop thinking about his hand on mine, his words echoing in my head. I was a father, a man who'd loved one woman his whole life. So why did Ryan's presence make me question everything I thought I knew about myself? The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ryan's presence in the house was a constant pull. Like gravity, I couldn't escape. Every glance, every accidental touch, felt like a spark threatening to ignite something I wasn't ready for. I threw myself into routine to keep the distance. Mornings were for grading papers, afternoons for errands, evenings for pretending everything was fine. But Ryan wasn't making it easy. He'd leave sketches on the kitchen table, portraits of strangers, landscapes, and once, a drawing of me. My face softened in a way I didn't recognize. "You're good at this," I told him, holding up the sketch, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, but his smile was proud. "It's how I make sense of things," he said. "Drawing what I see, what I feel." I didn't ask what he meant by that last part. I wasn't sure I could handle the answer. Ethan called that weekend, his voice bright through the phone. "How's Ryan holding up?" he asked. I glanced at Ryan, sprawled on the couch with a book, and my chest tightened. "He's okay," I said. "Just figuring things out." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, that's Ryan. Always a mess, but a good one." Guilt twisted in my gut. Ethan trusted me, trusted Ryan. What would he think if he knew the thoughts running through my head? The ones I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. That night, a storm rolled in, the kind that shakes the windows and makes the world feel smaller. Ryan and I ended up in the living room, the power flickering as we lit candles. The air was thick with the scent of rain and wax, and maybe that's why I let my guard down. "You ever think about who you are?" Ryan asked, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Like, who you're supposed to be?" I looked at him, the candlelight flickering across his face, and something in me broke open. "I thought I knew," I said. husband, father, teacher. But lately, I don't know. It's like I'm meeting myself for the first time. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, listening like my words were the only thing that mattered. That's not a bad thing, he said. Maybe it's just truth. The way he said it, so certain, so unafraid, made my heart ache. I wanted that certainty, that courage. The power went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Ryan laughed, a nervous sound, and I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. Our hands brushed as I passed it to him, and this time, neither of us pulled away. David, he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. What are we doing? I didn't have an answer, but I didn't move my hand. His fingers curled around mine, tentative, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. We sat there, hands clasped in the dark, the storm raging outside. My mind screamed at me to pull back, to remember who I was, who he was. But my heart wanted something else. Ryan, I said, my voice shaking. We can't. He squeezed my hand, just enough to steady me. I know, he said. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. The power came back on, flooding the room with light, and we let go, the moment slipping away. But it wasn't gone. It was there in the way he looked at me, in the way I couldn't stop looking at him. We didn't talk about it, but we didn't need to. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Ryan's handwriting, messy and familiar. Thanks for letting me stay. I'll be back tonight. My heart sank. He'd gone to work, but the house felt emptier without him. I spent the day distracted, replaying our conversation, his touch, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. By the time he came back, I was a mess of nerves, torn between wanting to pull him close and pushing him away. That night, we didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. We sat on the couch, closer than before, and when his hand found mine again, I didn't pull away. It was reckless, dangerous, wrong, but it was also the most honest thing I'd felt in years. The line between right and wrong blurred with every touch, every glance. Ryan's hand in mine felt like a lifeline, pulling me towards something I didn't understand but couldn't resist. By the end of the week, the house wasn't just a house, Anna Maria, it was a space where secrets lived, where every moment carried the weight of what we weren't saying. I tried to keep things normal. I cooked dinner. He washed dishes. We talked about his art, my classes, the Phillies' losing streak. But the air was charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. One night, he showed me his sketchbook, pages filled with vivid drawing, city streets, strangers' faces, and more than a few of me. You're easy to draw, he said, his voice teasing but his eyes serious. You've got this, quiet strength. I laughed it off, but my face burned. No one had looked at me like that in years, maybe ever. The guilt was a constant shadow. Ethan called again, asking about Ryan, about school, about life. I lied through my teeth, saying everything was fine, but every word felt like a betrayal. Ethan was my son, my priority, the one thing I'd sworn to protect. How could I explain this? How could I tell him I was falling for his best friend? That every moment with Ryan felt like a step towards something I couldn't name. It came to a head on a Friday night. Ryan had been out all day, looking for apartments, and came back exhausted, his shoulders slumped. No luck, he said, tossing his bag on the floor. Everything's too expensive, or they want a credit check I can't pass. I hated seeing him like that, defeated and small. You don't have to leave, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He looked at me, surprised, then smiled. You sure about that, David? I don't want to mess up your life. You're not, I said, too quickly. You're making it better. The truth of it hit me hard. Ryan wasn't just a guest anymore. He was part of this house. Part of me. We stood there, the kitchen clock ticking too loudly. And then he stepped closer. David, he said, his voice low. I don't know what this is, but I know I don't want it to stop. My breath caught. I should have stepped back, said something to break the moment. Instead, I leaned in. Our lips met, tentative at first, then hungry, desperate. It was like a dam breaking, years of loneliness pouring out in a single kiss. His hands were on my face, mine in his hair, and for a moment, nothing else mattered, not Ethan, not the world outside, not the fear clawing at the back of my mind. Just him, just us. We pulled apart, breathless, and the weight of it crashed down. Ryan, I said, my voice hoarse, we can't do this. His face fell, but he nodded. I know. Ethan, your life, all of it. But David, I'm falling for you. The words were a knife, sharp and sweet. I wanted to say it back, to tell him I felt the same, but the guilt stopped me. We need to be careful, I said instead. For Ethan. For you. He stayed in the guest room that night, and I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The kiss replayed in my mind, over and over, each memory a mix of joy and dread. I'd spent years building a life for Ethan, for Sarah's memory. Could I risk it all for this? For him. The next morning, Ryan was quiet. His usual brightness dimmed. I'll find a place soon, he said over breakfast. I don't want to make this harder for you. My heart sank. I didn't want him to go, but I didn't know how to ask him to stay. Not without destroying everything I'd built. The kiss changed everything. It was a line crossed, a truth we couldn't unlearn. Ryan and I moved through the house like we were orbiting each other close, but careful not to collide. Every glance felt like a confession, every touch a risk. I tried to focus on work, on grading papers, on anything but him. But Ryan was everywhere, his sketchbook on the coffee table, his jacket on the couch, his laugh echoing in my head. I caught myself watching him, memorizing the way he moved, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about art. It was reckless, dangerous, but I couldn't stop. One evening, he came home with a small canvas, a painting he'd done at school. It was abstract, all bold lines and soft colors, but I saw us in it wove figures, blurred at the edges, reaching for each other. What do you think? He asked, his voice nervous. I wanted to tell him it was beautiful, that it was us, but all I managed was, it's incredible, Ryan. He smiled, but there was a question in his eyes, one I wasn't ready to answer. The tension broke one night when we were doing dishes together. He flicked water at me, a playful gesture that caught me off guard. I laughed, splashing him back, and suddenly we were kids again, carefree and close. But then he stepped closer, his wet hands on my arms, and the laughter died. David, he said, his voice low, I can't keep pretending this isn't real. My heart pounded. I wanted to pull him close, to kiss him again, but the fear was stronger. Ryan, we can't, I said, stepping back. Ethan, he'd never understand. Ryan's face hardened, just for a moment. Maybe he would, he said. Maybe he'd want you to be happy. The words hit hard. Happy. Was that what this was? This aching, terrifying pull toward him. I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it. The next day, I called a friend, Mark, who'd known me since college. He was one of the few people I trusted with the truth. Over coffee at a diner, I spilled everything. Ryan, the kiss, The guilt. Mark listened, his face unreadable, then leaned forward. David, he said, you've been half alive since Sarah died. If this kid makes you feel something, maybe that's worth exploring. But you've got to be honest with yourself. With Ethan. His words stuck with me, a challenge I wasn't sure I could meet. That night, Ryan and I sat on the porch, the air cool and sharp. I talked to a friend today, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. About us. Ryan's eyes widened, but he didn't interrupt. I don't know what this is, I continued, but I know it's not nothing. And that scares the hell out of me. He reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. It scares me too, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. We didn't kiss again. Not then. But we talked. Really talked. About what this could mean. About the risks. About Ethan. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where I wasn't alone. Where Ryan was more than a guest in my home. It was a fragile hope, but it was there. By the end of the week, Ryan found an apartment. A cheap studio on the edge of town. I'm moving next week, he said, his voice quiet. But I don't want to lose this. He gestured between us, and my heart clenched. Neither do I said, and for the first time, I meant it. Ryan's last week in the house was a countdown I couldn't ignore. Every moment felt borrowed. Every touch a reminder of what we stood to lose. I wanted to hold on. To keep him close. But the reality of his leaving loomed large. We spent those days in a delicate balance, stealing moments when we could. A brush of hands in the kitchen, a shared smile over coffee, a late-night talk that stretched until dawn. Each one was a thread, weaving us closer, even as the world pulled us apart. I started to see Ryan not just as Ethan's friend, but as someone who saw me I saw mean didn't look away. One night, he took me to an art gallery where his work was displayed. His paintings were raw, vibrant, full of life. He stood beside me, nervous, as I studied a piece that felt like a confess-Iona swirl of blues and reds. Two figures caught in an embrace. That's us, he said quietly, confirming what I already knew. I wanted to tell him how much it meant, how much he meant, but all I could do was nod, my throat tight with emotion. The guilt never left, though. Ethan's calls were a reminder of the line we were crossing. I knew I had to tell him, but the thought of his reaction off losing him kept me silent. Ryan sensed it, too. You're worried about Ethan, he said one night, as we sat on the couch. I am too. But David, we can't keep hiding. He was right, but the fear was a weight I couldn't shake. I decided to test the waters with Ethan indirectly. During our next call, I mentioned Ryan staying over, keeping my tone casual. He's been a big help around the house, I said. Ethan laughed. Yeah, Ryan's great. I'm glad you guys are getting along. The words were innocent, but they cut deep. Getting along didn't begin to cover it. The night before Ryan's move, we sat on the porch, the stars bright above us. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Of what this means, of what happens next. Ryan took my hand, his grip firm. Me too, he said. But I know I want you in my life. David. Whatever that looks like. His words were a lifeline, but they also made the truth unavoidable. We couldn't keep this secret forever. The next morning, I helped Ryan pack his things. The guest room looked empty without his sketches, his clothes, his presence. As we loaded his car, he turned to me, his eyes searching. This isn't goodbye, he said, and before I could respond, he kissed me soft. Urgent. A promise. I kissed him back, my heart racing, knowing this was the start of something, not the end. But as his car pulled away, the weight of what came next settled in. I had to tell Ethan. I had to face the truth, no matter what it cost. Ryan's absence left the house hollow, like it had lost its heartbeat. I wandered through the rooms, seeing him everywhere: the couch where we'd laughed, the kitchen where we'd kissed, the porch where we'd laid our fears bare. I missed him, and that truth was both terrifying and undeniable. I knew I couldn't keep this from Ethan any longer. He deserved the truth, even if it broke us. I called him that weekend, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice bright. "What's up?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. About Ryan." There was a pause, and my heart sank. "Is he okay?" Ethan asked, concern in his voice. "He's fine," I said. It's about me. And him." I told him everything, or as much as I could manage. The words felt clumsy, raw, like I was tearing open a wound. I told him about the night Ryan stayed over, about the feelings I couldn't ignore, about the kiss that changed everything. Ethan was quiet, too quiet, and when he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "Dad, are you saying you're with Ryan? My Ryan?" The hurt in his voice was a knife to my chest. "I don't know what we are," I said, "but I care about him. And I'm so sorry if this hurts you." He hung up without another word. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, the silence deafening. I'd always been the one to fix things, to make Ethan's world right. Now, I'd broken it. Ryan called later that night, sensing something was wrong. I told Ethan. I said, my voice hollow. He was quiet for a moment. Then, how'd he take it? I laughed. A bitter sound. Not well. Ryan didn't push, just stayed on the line, his breathing a quiet comfort. "We'll figure it out," he said. Together. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of Ethan's silence was crushing. The next few days were a blur. Ethan didn't call, didn't text. I threw myself into work, but my mind was elsewhere. Ryan came over one evening, his new apartment key dangling from his pocket. "I missed you," he said, pulling me into a hug. It was the first time I'd felt grounded since Ethan's call. We talked for hours. About Ethan. About us. About what we wanted. "I want this," Ryan said, his hand on mine. "But I don't want to lose Ethan." "Or you." I nodded, my throat tight. "Me neither." I reached out to Ethan again, leaving voicemails, texts, anything to bridge the gap. Finally, he texted back, "I need time. Dad, this is a lot." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A crack in the wall. Ryan and I kept seeing each other, careful and quiet. We met at his apartment, at coffee shops, anywhere but the house that held so many memories. Each moment with him was a reminder of what I'd found, what I stood to lose. I was falling for him, hard, and for the first time, I let myself believe it might be okay. Weeks passed, and Ethan's silence was a wound that wouldn't heal. I clung to Ryan, to the hope he represented, but the fear of losing my son was a constant ache. Ryan was patient, his presence a steady light in the chaos. We built something real: dinners at his tiny apartment, walks through the city, quiet nights where we didn't need words. But Ethan was the shadow we couldn't escape. One day, a letter arrived, Ethan's handwriting on the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dad," it began, "I'm still mad. I don't get it, and maybe I never will. But you're my dad, and I love you. I just need time to figure out how this fits." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. I cried, the relief overwhelming. And when I showed Ryan, he held me, his own eyes wet. "He'll come around," he said. "He's Ethan." We decided to give Ethan space, but we also decided to live. Ryan's art was gaining attention, his paintings selling at local galleries. I went to every show, proud and awestruck. He introduced me as his partner, the words slipping out so naturally it took my breath away. I was learning to be okay with it. With us. With the man I was becoming. Months later, Ethan came home for the holidays. It was tense, the air thick with unspoken questions. Ryan was there, at my insistence, and the three of us sat in the living room, the same one where this all began. "I don't understand it," Ethan said finally, his voice raw. "But I see how you look at each other. And I want you to be happy, Dad." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. We talked, laughed, even cried, rebuilding something new from the pieces of what we'd had. Ryan moved back into the house, not as a guest, but as my partner. The guest room became his studio, filled with canvases and light. Ethan visited when he could, and though it wasn't the same, it was honest. We were a family, messy and real, learning to love each other in new ways. One night, Ryan and I sat on the porch, his head on my shoulder, the stars above us. "I didn't expect this," I said, my voice soft. "But I'm glad it's you." He smiled, his hand finding mine. "Me too," he said. "Me too." And in that moment, I knew we'd found something worth fighting for, a love that didn't erase the past, but built on it. A future that was ours to shape. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. And that was enough.